11:47 in the evening, Nora Ellis stood alone in the dining room of the Moretti estate and counted the chairs. 12. No place cards, no names, no indication of who had been invited, because, as the head of household had explained, with the flat certainty of someone who had delivered stranger instructions and been less surprised by what followed, there were no invitations. The chairs had been here when the room was opened. The room had been closed for 8 years. Nora had been told to set 12 places. She had been told to serve every chair, as though someone was already sitting there. She had been told that the dining room's old service manual was in the sideboard drawer, and that she should familiarize herself with the protocol before midnight. She had not been told anything else. She laid the last knife at the last place and looked at the result. 12 settings, 12 empty chairs. The clock on the wall was large, old and running correctly. 11:49. She opened the sideboard drawer and found the service manual. It was handwritten, not printed. The hand was careful and precise, the hand of someone who wrote as though words could be retrieved later as evidence. She turned to the diagram page and found 2 layouts. A serving rotation proceeding clockwise, a serving rotation proceeding counterclockwise. Beside the counterclockwise diagram, a note in the same careful hand. In case of disputed identity, serve the challenged seat first. At the bottom of the page, a final line. Final placement determines primary side. She did not know what that meant. She filed it in the part of her mind reserved for things that would make sense later, and hoped that part of her mind would have enough space. She noticed, when she made her final check of the room before midnight, a small amber light on a wall panel near the service entrance. It had not been there when she arrived. She did not touch it. She filed that too. She stood at the service station and looked at the room. 12 settings, 12 empty chairs. The candles along the center of the table had been lit per the protocol, burning at exactly the height specified in the service manual for a first course that had not yet arrived. The room smelled of wax and old wood and the specific kind of cold that belongs to spaces that have been heated after a long time unoccupied, a warmth that had not yet fully reached the walls. She did not know who was coming. She knew they had been announced as dead. She knew the room had been built to receive them. She knew the bread was cooling on the staging shelf, and that if no one came, she was going to be very alone in a very formal room with 12 very quiet candles and no explanation. 11:59. The clock struck 12. The lights went out. 3 seconds of complete darkness. Then 12 narrow doors, one behind each chair, built so flush with the paneling that she had not seen them when the room was lit, opened simultaneously. 12 people in dark clothing entered and sat. They moved to their chairs without hesitation. They did not look at each other. They did not look at her. They sat with the ease of people who had done this before, in this room, and understood exactly what the ritual required. Nora stood at the service station and looked at the guest at seat 6. She had seen his face before, not in person, in an obituary. The death notice had been dated 11 years ago. She was still looking at him when Lucian Moretti came in through the main door and stood at the head of the table. He was approximately 35 years old, dressed in black, and he surveyed the room with the expression of a man cataloging the ways in which a situation was already departing from the plan. 12 people died serving my family. He looked around the table. Tonight, one of them answers for betraying it. Nora placed the bread course at seat 6. Under the guest's napkin, folded once, was a small piece of paper. She unfolded it. He will kill all 12 before dessert. She set the napkin down. She looked at Lucian. He was looking directly at her. She did not know whether the note was warning her about Lucian, or warning Lucian about the room. 12 hours earlier, the head of household had shown Nora to the dining room and left her with the service manual, the menu, and a set of instructions that raised more questions than they answered. Nora had come to the Moretti estate through an agency referral that she had not applied to. Before this position, she had spent 4 years working events at a diplomatic club where the unspoken rules were as consequential as the spoken ones, and before that 2 years at a private political reception venue where the work consisted primarily of being present in rooms where significant things were being decided and conducting herself as though she were part of the furniture. She had been dismissed from the diplomatic club for refusing to conform to a client who had asked that a certain other guest had been in attendance when he had not. The client had been insistent. Nora had been firm. Her employment had ended the following morning. She had not found another position easily, which was how the Moretti referral had seemed like an opportunity rather than a warning. The dining room was on the ground floor of the East Wing. It had been closed since the death of the previous head of the family, 8 years prior. The door was heavy. The air inside was old but not stale, which meant the ventilation had been maintained even in disuse, which meant someone had been caring for the room even while it was officially shut. Nora had noted that and said nothing. She had also noted, when she did her preliminary layout, that there were 13 sets of cutlery in the sideboard, 12 for the table. 1 extra set, wrapped separately, labeled in the same careful handwriting as the service manual, Chair 13. She had carried the service manual to Lucian's study and knocked. He had opened the door himself, which surprised her. She had held up the extra cutlery set. There are only 12 chairs. Lucian looked at the label. You were hired to notice details, not to ask about them. That depends on whether the answer keeps you alive. He said it the way he said most things, with the even tone of someone who was not threatening, simply being precise. She looked at him for a moment. Then I will note the detail and continue preparing. She turned to leave. Miss Ellis. She stopped. Do not serve counterclockwise unless the room gives you cause. She turned back. He was holding a pen and not writing with it, which meant he was thinking rather than working. What constitutes cause? She said. He looked at her. You will know it when you see it, he said. She had not yet determined whether Lucian Moretti was wise or simply unwilling to explain himself. The room, she said. It has sensors in the chairs. It was not a question. Yes. Weight and something else. Weight distribution, ring identification, and dominant hand pressure. So the chairs know who is sitting in them. The chairs know whether who is sitting in them matches who is supposed to be sitting in them, Lucian said. Those are different things. Nora considered that. And if they don't match, that, he said, is what the counterclockwise protocol is for. She looked back. He was already returning to his desk. She went back to the dining room and reread the note beside the counterclockwise diagram 3 times. Later, when the room had been set and the first course was staged, and she had an hour before midnight, she found Lucian in the corridor outside the dining room. He was standing with his arms at his sides and his eyes on the closed door, with the expression of someone rehearsing a conversation they did not expect to go well. He had not eaten. She could tell by the particular quality of stillness in him, not the stillness of a man at rest, but the stillness of a man running on something other than food. She went back to the kitchen and returned with a small plate. She set it on the console table beside him without comment. He looked at it, then at her. "Collapsing before midnight is not part of the protocol," she said. He ate, though she could tell he did not like having been noticed. She was folding napkins at the service station when he spoke again. 3 supply routes were compromised in the last 4 months, he said. 2 men are dead. The codes used to identify the routes belong exclusively to a network my father built. A network that officially ceased to exist when he did. Nora set down the napkin she was folding. "The guests tonight are from that network. They are the network," Lucian said. "Every member was publicly recorded as deceased. They have been operating under dead men's names for between 6 and 18 years. Nora thought about the obituary she had recognized at seat 6. "And you believe one of them sold the codes. I believe one of them never stopped reporting to whoever sent them." She finished folding the napkin. "The list in the manual," she said. 12 names. There is a 13th line that has been cut away." Lucian was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "Who was it?" "I don't know yet," he said. She had been in service long enough to recognize the difference between "I don't know" and "I am not going to tell you." This was the first one. She filed that too and went back to staging the first course. The bread course was served. The 12 guests ate or did not eat according to their individual habits, and Nora moved through the room with the systematic attention she brought to every event, cataloging what she saw. The woman at seat 2 used her right hand. The service manual's guest notes, a single page attached at the back, covering physical indicators for each registered member, listed seat 2 as strongly left-handed. Nora set the notation aside and continued. The man at seat 4 wore 2 rings, one on his left hand, bearing the crest she recognized from the coat of arms printed beside his assigned name. One on his right, bearing a different crest. She did not know whose. She made a note. The man at seat 12 did not eat the bread. He sat with his hands in his lap and his eyes on the door at the east side of the room and waited with the specific patience of someone who was not waiting for food. There was also a guest at the table who did not look like a guest. A man at seat 9 who moved through the meal with the economical attention of someone performing a role while monitoring the performance of everyone around him. When Nora passed behind his chair, he dropped his spoon. He picked it up. The movement of his fingers traced 3 numbers on the tablecloth. 2, 4, 12. Then he tapped once beneath the final number. He looked up and met her eyes once, briefly. She continued serving. A guest at seat 7 reached for her wrist as she withdrew a plate, not roughly, but deliberately, the way people reach for things they want to examine. Lucian spoke before she could. "The staff are outside your vote." The guest released her wrist. Nora withdrew her arm and looked at Lucian. He was revising his estimate of her. "You understand more than I intended," he said, quietly enough that the table could not hear. "You gave me the manual," Nora said. "Understanding it is the job." He said nothing to that, but he did not look away. When the black soup was served, the outer doors locked. Nora heard the mechanism engage, a solid, unhurried sound, the sound of something that had been built to work reliably, and was doing so, and kept moving through the rotation. She adjusted the placement of the bread knife at seat 2. No reaction from the right hand. The correct response from a strongly left-handed person would have been a small, reflexive movement, a reach that corrected for the new angle. There was none. She mentioned an allergy, generically, while pouring water near seat 4. The man at seat 4 looked up with the expression of a man checking whether the information applied to him. His right hand moved to cover the second ring. She had not asked about the ring. She continued to seat 12 and set down the soup. She named the dish, as the service manual specified. The man at seat 12 did not recognize the name. The manual noted that seat 12's assigned member had been attached to the family long enough to know the dish by its older name, the name it had carried for the first 2 decades of the Moretti estate's existence. He responded to the current name, not the older one. 3 chairs, 3 discrepancies. 2, 4, and 12. She completed the rotation and listened. The spoons at 2, 4, and 12 were quieter. Appetite performed rather than felt. Gabriel, at seat 9, ate normally. He also watched the room the way she was watching it, which meant he was doing what she was doing, which meant he was not a guest in the way the others were guests. She cleared the bowl nearest her and turned toward the service entrance. She was clearing the soup course when she found Lucian near the service entrance. She told him what she had found. He was quiet. "The chair at the east wall," she said. "Seat 13. The manual shows a weight sensor for each position. When I set seat 12's place, the indicator light under the runner shifted, not 12, a sensor further back." "There is a track," Lucian said. "I noticed. It was built for a chair that has never been placed. Who would sit in it?" He did not answer that. But she had worked enough events to know. When the answer to a question was already present in the room, and the questioner was deciding how much to share. She looked at the door at the far end of the east wall. "Whoever it is," she said, "the room was built to expect them." She found Lucian at the sideboard during the transition between courses. He was looking at something that was not there, the middle distance, the place people look when they are reviewing a memory they would prefer to revise. "The room belonged to your father," she said. It was not a question. He turned. "You found the monogram." She had found it on the underside of the chair at position 13, a chair that was not in the room, but whose mounting hardware was still present in the east wall track. VM. "He was announced as dead 8 years ago," Nora said. "He was announced," Lucian said. "The distinction was exact and deliberate. You never saw a body. I saw a ceremony," he said. "A casket. The documentation was complete. But a pause. But the codes that were used to compromise the 3 roots belong to a cipher system my father designed. A system I decommissioned after his death. A system that should not exist anymore." Nora set down the service cloth she had been carrying. "You think he is alive?" "I think," Lucian said carefully, "that I have been afraid to investigate it thoroughly enough to know." She waited. He looked at the closed dining room door. If he is alive, then every choice I have made in 8 years was made inside a structure he allowed to exist. Every reform, every alliance, every person I protected, he could have undone any of it at any point. He said it the way people say things they have been carrying in a locked room inside themselves for a long time. That is what you are afraid of, Nora said. Not that he is alive. That everything you built might have been built with his permission. Lucian looked at her. Not with the evaluating attention she had become accustomed to from him. Something quieter than that. A chair does not decide who belongs in it, she said. The people who stay when the room locks do. He looked at her. Something shifted in his face that she had not seen before. Not the evaluation she had grown used to, not the management. Something quieter. For 8 years, he said, I made decisions as though I had to be a different person from the one my father was. He paused. I am not certain I succeeded. I am not certain the 2 versions are as different as I believed. Nora looked at the room, the table, the empty chairs, the system built into every surface. You are not him, she said, but you are going to have to keep choosing not to be. That is different from already being something else. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he said, I need to tell you something about tonight that I should have told you before midnight. She waited. He told her about the voting system. The 3rd course opened it. The 4th course locked the result. Dessert confirmed it and activated the partition. He told her about the counterclockwise protocol, that it forced the system to re-verify only the contested seats, highest number down, before accepting the vote. Chair 13 controlled the ordinary procedure. Under an identity challenge, if the vote was voided, the server's final placement determined which side the partition protected. The amber light near the service entrance meant the room's original audio archive was recording. Rafe Doran, Vincent's former security chief, still controlled the east corridor. Gabriel's signal 2, 4, 12 identified the disputed seats. The final tap meant 2 of his people were already in position outside. He told her that the note under the napkin had been placed by Elena Darrow at seat 3, and that Elena was not warning Nora about him. Elena was trying to make Nora panic, disrupt the service, and give Vincent grounds to declare the ritual compromised before the vote. You knew who sent it. I recognize the fold. And the agency referral. I chose you. I read why the diplomatic club dismissed you. I needed someone who would not confirm an identity simply because the room expected it. Nora absorbed this. You put me in this room without telling me what the room was. If you had appeared to know the plan, you would not have survived the 1st course. You decided that risk for me. He did not deny it. I can get you out through the kitchen, he said, before the 3rd course locks, if you want to leave. And the 12 guests? My responsibility. She thought about that for a moment. You made me part of this when you handed me the menu, she said. The manual, the counterclockwise diagram, the note about disputed identity. She paused. You gave me the tools and kept the purpose. That is not protection. That is control with better manners. He held her gaze. He did not argue with her. She understood that for him, this was the equivalent of an apology. What do I need to know to finish this? She said. He reached into his jacket and placed a small object on the sideboard. A folding blade, thin enough to be mistaken for a service tool. If the room closes and I am not near you, he said, "Do not wait for permission." She looked at it. "Tell me what you need," he said. Not a command, a question. She picked up the blade. "The dessert trolley needs to be positioned before the fourth course clears," she said. "And I need to know which direction starts at 12. Counterclockwise," he said, "starts at the highest number and moves down." "Then I start at 12. He nodded. "Lucian." He looked at her. "If your father is in that room tonight, if he actually walks through that door, what happens to the vote?" He was quiet for a long moment. "He takes the chair," Lucian said. "He controls the ordinary procedure. The challenge protocol is the only part he cannot overrule once it begins." Nora thought about the track in the east wall and the hardware waiting for a chair that had never been placed. "Then we need to finish this before he sits down," she said. She went back to the dining room. The red wine course was served. The vote opened. Lucian stood at the head of the table and made his case the way he did everything, without theater, with precision. He named the 3 compromised routes. He named the 2 men who had died. He named the cipher system that should not have existed. He said, "The person who sold the codes was in this room, and he intended to identify them before dessert." And then the east door opened. Vincent Moretti entered. He was in his late 60s, unhurried, and he walked to the chair at the end of the east wall track and stood beside it. He was exactly the age he should have been, and the room received him exactly the way a room receives someone it was built for. Lucian did not move. 8 years, Vincent said. 8 years, Lucian said. "You reformed my organization," Vincent said. "You reduced its reach. You gave its members the option to leave. You replaced its methods with contracts and accountability. He let that sit for a moment. You made it smaller, safer, more honest." He looked around the table, less powerful, more durable, Lucian said. "That remains to be seen." Vincent sat. "I built this network to outlast me. It is doing so. Tonight we determine whether it outlasts your tenure as well." "The routes were a test," he added. 2 deaths were the price of learning whether your version of this family could survive pressure." He looked at the 12 guests. "You know the protocol. The 4th course locks the result. The man who controls this chair controls the procedure." He placed his hands on the table. "Vote." The roast course was served. Nora moved through the rotation and watched the room's calculations play out on 12 faces: loyalty, fear, pragmatism, and the particular neutrality of people waiting to attach themselves to the winning position. Gabriel, at seat 9, did not look at her. He looked at his plate. Then, once, very briefly, at the dessert trolley. Nora understood. The vote went around the table. It went slowly, because several guests were genuinely undecided, and the undecided ones leaned toward the man in the chair at the end of the east wall. He was the one they knew. He was the one who had built the system they were living inside. The vote began at seat 1 and moved clockwise. Elena Darrow, at seat 3, voted without hesitation and with the small, satisfied expression of someone completing a task they have been assigned. The man at seat 6, the face from the 11-year-old obituary, paused before voting. He looked at Lucian. He looked at Vincent. He voted for Vincent. Nora watched Lucian absorb this without reacting. At seat 7, a woman voted for Lucian. At seat 8, for Vincent. 9, Gabriel, voted for Lucian, with the flat certainty of someone who had already paid for their choice and was not interested in making a different one. The tally accumulated. 6 for Vincent, 5 for Lucian. Seat 12. The man at seat 12, the man who had not recognized the soup's old name, who had waited all evening for the east door to open, cast his vote, 7 to 5. Vincent looked at Lucian. "The room confirms it," he said. Nora looked at the dessert trolley. She looked at the service manual open on the sideboard to the diagram page. She looked at Lucian, who looked back at her with the expression of a man who had, at last, accepted the shape of the risk. She took the trolley. The room's attention followed her, the way attention follows anyone moving through a space where everyone else is still. She moved to seat 12. She picked up the first dessert, a white pear arrangement, simple, clean, and placed it at position 12, with the careful precision she brought to every placement. The indicator beneath the runner registered. She watched the small light shift. She moved on. Vincent said, "The dessert is served clockwise." "The service manual notes counterclockwise for disputed identity," Nora said. "There is no disputed identity." "There are 3, she said. She served 12. The ring signal was absent, and the weight profile fell outside the stored range. Disputed. She served 4. 2 rings, 2 identities. The system registered both. Disputed. She served 2. The dominant hand pressure contradicted the registered profile. Disputed. 3 contested seats. Nora took the final untouched dessert from the trolley and placed it on the empty track between chair 13 and chair 1. A directional light beneath the table shifted from east to west. The vote was void. Vincent stood. "You invalidated the protocol." "The protocol invalidated 3 of your votes," Nora said. "That is not how the system—" "The system is reading what is actually here," she said, "not what you put in place." Vincent looked at Lucian. "You cannot hold this room," Vincent said. "You have no standing to claim the procedure." Lucian said, "I have standing to claim the result." He reached under the table's edge and engaged the partition control. The room divided. A wall of reinforced glass descended along the center line of the table, dividing east from west. Vincent and most of his confirmed allies were caught on the east. Lucian, Nora, Gabriel, and several valid votes remained on the west. Vincent stood on the east side. He was recalculating. "You have a wall," he said through the glass. "You do not have the exits." "I have the recording," Lucian said. "Of what?" "Of this," Lucian said. "All of it, the vote, the 3 disputed chairs. Your voice confirming that you compromised the 3 routes, the identities in this room." He paused. "And the 8 years. The lights on the east side went down. Not completely. A dim maintenance level, enough to see by, not enough to operate in. Rafe's men entered the hallway outside the east door. They found Gabriel's 2 people waiting there. The exchange was brief and decisive. Nora heard it without seeing it. She was watching Vincent. The lights on the east side were at maintenance level, enough to see shapes, not enough to read the room. On the west side, the lighting was normal. This was deliberate. Vincent had built a room that rewarded the primary side. He had not anticipated that an identity challenge could transfer that designation through the server's final placement. The lights followed the result Nora had already declared. She kept the dessert trolley between herself and the glass, a reminder that she was still working. He stood in the dim light on the east side of the glass and looked at his son through it with the expression of a man who had not yet decided whether this was a defeat or merely a complication? You built nothing, Vincent said. I built something you couldn't dismantle in 8 years of trying, Lucian said. That seems like building to me. Before the glass fully sealed, 2 guests who had voted for Vincent crossed to the west side. 2 others slipped through the kitchen service hatch, a passage Nora had used to bring in the dessert trolley, too narrow for the partition to seal, and apparently known to people who had been watching the room's layout since long before the dinner began. They were gone before anyone could stop them. Nora noted their faces. She noted the direction they took. She filed it. The partition came down at 1:40 in the morning. By 2, Rafe's men had been redirected or detained. The kitchen exit had been secured, and 3 hours of audio from the dining room's original system were in the hands of Lucian's legal team. Vincent sat on the east side of the glass for 6 hours before anyone opened the partition. He waited with the patience of a man who considered waiting a form of power. Lucian let him wait. He did not open the partition until he had what he needed. In the 2 weeks that followed, Lucian did not execute the people he had captured. He named them. Gabriel's family, who had been held in a property outside the city, were located and moved within the first 48 hours. This had required 2 days of work that Nora was not present for, but she saw the result on the 3rd morning when Gabriel ate breakfast in the Moretti kitchen, with the ease of someone who had set down something heavy and discovered that the ground was still there. He had been inside the buried 12 for 11 years. He had spent 3 of them working to get a message out. He did not say any of this at breakfast. He ate and drank his coffee and asked Nora whether the kitchen kept a certain kind of tea, and she found it in the back of the cabinet. And that was the closest either of them came to discussing what had happened in the dining room. The broader work followed. Every confirmed member of the buried 12, true name, the family network they had infiltrated, the assets held under their false identities, the intelligence passed in both directions, was formally documented and the information distributed, not to law enforcement, to the families they had been watching, to the estates they had embedded themselves in, to the lawyers and accountants who had been managing assets in dead men's names. The buried 12 had operated on the premise that the dead could not be questioned. Lucian made them visible. Gabriel testified that Vincent had personally ordered the compromise of the 3 Moretti routes, naming specific dates and instructions. Lucian did not win completely. 2 members of the buried 12 had reached the kitchen service hatch before the partition fully engaged. The intelligence they carried, partial, but not nothing, had reached a competing family within 48 hours. 3 estates that had been infiltrated were demanding restitution. A portion of Vincent's transferred assets had already been moved beyond the reach of Lucian's legal team. The war Lucian had spent 8 years trying to prevent was now a war he was going to have to win differently than he had won it that night. He was, Nora observed, working through this with the methodical focus of a man who had expected exactly this outcome and was not surprised by it. Vincent was alive and in custody, and had not yet spoken. He was waiting for something. Lucian was waiting for him to understand that the thing he was waiting for was not coming. He built his power by making people disappear, Lucian said. In the dining room on the 5th day, looking at the wall where the partition had descended, He believed the dead were his to command. Nora was resetting the table, not for another dinner, just resetting it. The way she reset things, methodically, without ceremony, returning each element to its correct position. "And now," she said, "now every name he buried is on a document in front of the families he used them against." He paused. He cannot command the dead if the dead are no longer secrets. The dining room was restored. The 12 chairs sat around the table. The 13th chair, Vincent's chair, retrieved from the east wall track, stood against the wall. Its sensors had been removed. Its identifying ring had been removed. It was a chair, just a chair. Nora stood in the doorway and looked at it. Lucian came to stand beside her. "Why not destroy it?" she said. "Evidence should not disappear simply because it is dangerous," he said. She thought about that. "Where will your chair be?" she said. "If there are more dinners, wherever the decisions can still be questioned," he said. She looked at him. He was looking at the table, the real table, the one with 12 places and no hidden systems, no locking mechanisms, no ballots embedded in the wood. "You still have not apologized," she said. "I know, for putting me in the room without telling me what it was. I know, for deciding what I could handle." "Yes," she waited. He turned to face her. "You could have left through the kitchen," he said, "before the 3rd course. You could have told me the truth before midnight. Would you have stayed?" She looked at him. "Ask me now," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Stay," he said. "Not as a member of staff. I want you to rebuild the guest verification, the identity protocol, the right to stop a ritual if something is wrong, a reporting process that does not go through me." He paused. "I want someone who will notice what I miss and tell me when I am wrong. Do not offer me authority," she said, "when what you mean is trust." He looked at her. "Then stay as the woman I trust to notice what I miss. That sounds exhausting. I am told I am difficult. You are told correctly." Lucian pulled out the chair beside his own. "Not as staff," he said. "Sit with me." Nora looked at the place he had made. "That is not an apology." "No, but it is a beginning." She sat. When Lucian took the chair beside her, she reached across the table, caught his hand, and drew him close enough to kiss. The dining room was opened again 3 weeks later. The table was set for 12. The 13th chair stood against the wall with a single small plate on the seat. No food on it. Just the plate, clean, present. Lucian came in at 11:59. "How many guests tonight?" 12, Nora said. He looked at the chair against the wall. "And that one?" Nora looked at the plate. "For the truth," she said. The clock struck 12. The door opened. 12 people came in. They wore their own names. They sat in their own chairs. No hidden doors, no sensors, no systems operating beneath the meal. Just people at a table in a room with the windows open. Cut to black. Mafia hearts and secrets. Was Lucian right to expose every member of the buried 12, even knowing it would start a war between the Mafia families they had infiltrated? Or should he have kept his father's network secret and used it for himself? Share your answer below and subscribe to Mafia Hearts and Secrets for more dangerous romances hidden inside the underworld's most powerful families.